Thank you very much for coming along tonight. My name is Michael Smythe, and I work under the pseudonym of Nomad. Tonight, I'm joined by Marcus Coates, who is the artist who's made this piece that you've seen fragments of in collaboration with Chrome Huth, and also lots of other key people like Ernie and Gloria from the Haygate Estate. I'm not sure whether the Southwark Council members are here yet. We've also got some of the developers, hopefully arriving soon, etc. And I'm also joined by Will Hodgkinson, who is a journalist and author. Will's recent book, Ballad of Britain, has just come out. And the reason I asked Will to come along is because his practice is very similar to the process Marcus and I have sort of taken to make this piece. Will predominantly writes about music, song, performance, and within his books he always goes on a journey to find out information or to learn something, which is very much the process Marcus and I have taken to make this piece. The performance downstairs with Marcus and Chrome Huth was completely improvised. It was very much about responding to the different people that you can see on the TV screens that we encountered before the actual performance. The piece so far is unfinished. What you see upstairs is unedited, sort of really rough rushes of the documentary that we shot called The Vision Quest, which was shot pre the concert gig, where we went around and met lots of key people in this neighborhood and got them to take us on an imaginary journey, or their own journey, in a sense guide Marcus through a visioning. These lessons, for instance, Wahid, he is in charge of demolishing Elephant and Castle, taught Marcus how to dance with intention, for instance. We have Ernie, who teaches Marcus how to use his voice to articulate abstract sounds of happiness and sadness, etc., sort of articulating his experience being moved off the Haygate Estate after living there for over 30 years. Then we have the Southwark councillors up the back, who are taking Marcus on a journey into the imagination, almost like a psychedelic team-building exercise, where they talk Marcus on a journey through the neighbourhood using different metaphors of sort of animals and spirits to kind of guide his way. And then we've got Shane and Buster over there, who he kind of lives around the neighbourhood in sort of various different places with his dog. So these are just some of the characters that help sort of inform the performance that's happened at the Coronet Theatre on the 5th of June and that you saw downstairs. We're now at the process of trying to articulate what this story is, because the actual subject matter, as we'll talk in a minute, is still really unresolved. I guess this evening is more of an informal discussion, really, and any input you have will be fantastic. I think we'll start off by just talking about the logic of the project from our side and the process of making it to date. But if anyone has any kind of comments or wants to interject in any way, please do. So, cheers.
Well, shall I start?
Yeah.
Well, for me, the project really started when Michael came to me and said, I really want to work with you on pretty much anything. Come up with something. We can come up with something together. And we were kind of racking our brains thinking about something. And quite a few things came up and didn't go right and got cancelled. And it seemed like 2 years of projects that we worked on actually got cancelled.
Yeah, well, in a sense, it was a rolling conversation.
Yeah.
And we're looking at really big issues internationally, like the conflict in the Middle East between Israel and Palestine, as something impossible to resolve. But the idea that an absurd act, like a sort of middle-class English gentleman going over there and doing a shamanic rite, maybe could be so absurd it could maybe do something.
So we're really looking at the sort of usefulness of art, actually, and the role of the artist in that sense, and whether the artist has an extended role in terms of his or her responsibility beyond just producing art, art being a functional entity, really. So that's what we're really interested in. And I was really interested in the idea of the performer, and particularly the musical performer, and the popular musical performer, really, or the pop star, really, and how this figure has kind of soaked up so much of so many roles that have existed in traditional cultures. Basically, a kind of healing role. The idea of transformation, transforming a sense of a collective imagination into something quite solid and concrete. And there are many examples of this happening within shamanic traditions, for example. And it felt for me, because a lot of my work is involved in this, working for the community on the behalf of specific problems, that this could be quite an interesting way to work. So we started to look at sort of groups to collaborate with.
Yeah, so I guess we were looking at the transformative power of music as well, popular culture, I guess, as you were saying. And originally we thought about making just a folk song and recording it just as a disc, basically. And then we're thinking, who could we bring in to collaborate to provide the music, basically? And it kind of naturally just came into our minds that Chrome Hoof randomly would be the band that we would want to collaborate with. Yeah.
Can I just take you back and say you're here? Were you already here in the Elephant Castle at this point, or were you?
No. We had no location. It was very much about an idea about, as Marcus said, inhabiting this sort of this new performative space, which essentially became the idea of making a record, which then led logically to who would help us produce that in a way, who would provide the backing for that. And for me, even though it was almost like just appeared in my head, it seemed very logical that Chrome Hoof would be the ultimate band to do that, which, I think maybe Will could elaborate on, because they are this kind of cluster of exactly what London is. It's chaotic and loud and anarchic, but funky and functional and tight, So I guess from there we had the task of convincing this, 10 to 15 piece doom psychedelic prog metal band that they wanted to come on a journey with us, which was quite interesting unto itself.
But interestingly, sort of simultaneously to this, we kind of came across Elephant and Castle. It wasn't like, okay, we've got the band now we need something to work with. It all kind of happened at the same time.
And I think that was also, once again, a very intuitive thing. In terms of the coronet came to mind, we're thinking, well, where can we host this ritual? And the coronet came to mind because it was slightly ambiguous as to what it did. It was in the heart of London, and no one really knew what kind of performance music goes on in there. Shunt was known as a performance art venue, and the Astoria was rock and gay disco, and the Apollo is known for big bands, and the Coronet is this massive venue in the heart of London that no one knew anything really about. They knew of lots of mythology. Did somebody get shot there? Is it open? Is it closed? And I felt that would give us some sort of autonomy in terms of this mix-up of genres. No one knew what the venue did, and no one knew what Chrome Hoof and Marcus were going to do, and I thought that was a very important part of the whole process.
And then exploring out from the Coronet, it felt like the Coronet had a real function here. I mean, it was at the heart of this place that felt like structurally it was just about to dissolve. I mean, the whole area around the Coronet it felt like at that point it was just about to be knocked down. Turns out it hasn't been knocked down yet, and we don't know when it's going to be knocked down. But that really keyed into, especially into, I think, my sense of the functionality of this music and the functionality of this performance and who this could be for and why we should do it. It felt like we needed a reason to do it. We shouldn't just do the performance. It needed to have a purpose. So we started to talk to whoever would talk to us really around the neighbourhood, and Michael made connections with
cold
lots of local people.
January morning. Emery, the cinematographer, and Pierre from Norbert and myself rocked up at the Haygate Estate Tenants and Residents Association. We heard that they don't pick up their phone very often and they get harassed a lot by different people wanting to tell their story. So we stood outside before knocking, going, okay, what are we going to tell them? This is really confusing. We knocked, went in, they warmly greeted us, said, no, you're 10 years too late. No, our story's, it's been had. But we didn't leave their office for about 6 months and ended up getting to know them all, and basically they took us on an amazing journey throughout the last 30 plus years of the Hague Estate existing, and also played a fundamental part in the formation of the content of the whole piece. Ernie and Gloria in particular actually came on a thing called Vision Quest, which we spent, after many months of filming and doing research, we all kind of lived on the estate and around Elephant Castle for several days, sort of eating, sleeping, meeting lots of people, having lots of conversation and filming content for the gig. And Ernie and Gloria felt sorry for us and gave us a house and showers, and also joined us in this journey, which I guess is very similar to all the different collaborators from the different components you can see. It started to transform away from our vision of this and into the vision of the people we were working with, which was quite interesting. And I think hopefully that's slightly apparent. More abstract in the concert performance itself, but more apparent in the film footage we've shot outside of that.
Yeah, it became, as Michael says, really apparent that there's so many different visions in this area. And it's an area that I, as an outsider, thought was pretty soulless, pretty empty, pretty spiritless, really. But since having done all this work, it's totally changed my opinion of the area. And I think for me it was about finding a kind of personal vision of what this place could be, but also trying to represent a little, if I could, what all these other visions of this place could be. And that's the vision, the singular, monumental vision of the council in terms of this mega city, what that could be. The guy is homeless, talking to him, Ernie and Gloria talking about their vision and what they've been through in terms of them being relocated and turfed out of their house into another house. So it became a sort of an onslaught, really, of all these visions of the future and what they can be. And we're still sort of sifting through all that, really, and finding out where I find out where I sit personally in it. And the performance was really a start of that. It was using elements that all these different people gave me to perform with. And I think I kind of reached some sort of conclusion in that performance, but how I'm going to present and distill that into a form which can communicate, I'm not quite sure at the moment.
Yeah.
Yes, I just wanted to have an idea about, well, you just touch on that, what would be the final form of this journey, and who is your audience, who do you have in mind as an audience, particularly in reference to this healing process you were just pointing out as the heart of your, so the motivated kind of, the heart of what motivates you.
Well, for me, because it's been such a long and elaborate process, it feels like the audience, we've already met the audience, and the audience has already seen it, almost. This is like almost another stage of the process. I feel like the audience were the people we worked with, and they carry on being those people. But wider than that, I think I wanted to some resolution for this work, to speak to anyone, even if they don't know the Elephant Castle.
Yeah, I think before we actually gave, after the concert, we went around to the council again and gave them our finding, basically interpreted what Marcus saw with the swallows, geese and seals, and told them sort of essentially what that meant, decoded that. So that was one way of readdressing and sort of summarising the more abstract concept. But that process is still ongoing, and I think one thing that's come out of that process is realising that the situation is kind of universal. It's happening everywhere. Every city has gentrification, and every city has this sort of class battle, I guess. And I, in a way, the film is slightly about that, but it's also about entertainment. It's about it's about people, really, and their imagination, which is a fundamental part of this project. It's about the power of the imagination. And everyone we've gone and filmed use their imagination in the process. It almost goes beyond the actual discussion point, the first discussion point. And in terms of the audience, I think the gig was an interesting sort of hot house for me. I've never had such extreme reactions to anything I've ever done in my life. People either loved it or hated it, or it was very extreme. And you had so many different audiences there from the way it was marketed. You had people there for Marcus, who didn't understand why he was being all arrogant and cool on a stage with a horse head. And you had Chrome Hoof audience who were like, get the guy off, like, what's he doing? And then you had Wild Birds and Peace Drums audience, who, I should say, opened up the ritual. It's a Swedish duo. And they did this very organic drum circle. They also improvised with 20 drummers. Usually it's just 2 in the band, to kind of raise the energy of the night, almost like a smoking ceremony. And their audience were completely baffled by Marcus and Chrome Hoof, and it was quite polarizing. And you can see that in the video footage, especially when Marcus comes out, lots of people going, what the hell is this? So the audience is very expansive, and that, for me, is what's interesting about the project as well.
It definitely wasn't a normal gig in a normal sense, or even a normal art project,
Yeah.
That was the most interesting thing about it. The great thing about it was that you couldn't put your finger on it, and that's what fascinated for me. I mean, I tried, and this is quite indicative of the sort of strangeness of it all. I was trying to do an article, because I'm a journalist, I was trying to do an article first for the Times and then the Guardian about the whole thing. And no one could quite get their head around the whole, is this an art thing, or is this a social, is this for the social pages, or is this about a rock and roll, is this about a 14-piece heavy metal, funk, disco rock and roll band, who dress up in these crazy costumes? No one could get their head around what it was, and to be honest with you, neither can I. And I think that was quite good, it was quite interesting. And it was going along to a meeting with Ernie and yourself and some Southwark councillors, and, talking about this thing, which to me sounded, frankly, totally preposterous. And then, the councillors, to their credit, were taking it incredibly seriously and sort of talking about sort of, quantifiable solutions and achievable goals within the realm of a man sort of wearing a sort of goat on his head or something. And I think it's brilliant, that everyone sort of, am I the only one here who thinks it was weird? Everyone else just thought it was completely normal and sort of, yeah, fine, that'll solve Elephant and Castle's problems.
Which once again goes back to the absurdity of the situation actually opening a lot of doors. Like, it's been incredibly contentious, the whole process in this neighbourhood, and I think a lot of people stuck with us because the proposition was so ridiculous. And the councillors in particular have a lot of pressure on them at the moment, and the fact that they were, one, financially supporting us, but secondly, being characters in the film,
getting involved,
very easily ruin their careers, was quite impressive.
I think it might have ruined their careers. No, it hasn't.
Yeah.
Can you just maybe talk a bit more about the shamanic intention or non-intention, but the shamanic side of the ritual?
Sorry, could you repeat that question again?
Could you just talk a little bit more about the shamanic side of the ritual and how, what you were doing in terms of which space you were clearing and which space you were opening up in terms of, which is obviously what you do when you create a shamanic ritual, is that you open the space to what will happen in that space at the time, and then at the end it's closed down. And it would just be interesting to know what you were opening the space for when you did choose to open that space.
Well, my intention really, in a loosely shamanic way, was to open up a space, as you call it, to really explore my own imagination, but in a very, in the imaginative world, in a very self-generating way. So that I wasn't really in control of my own imagination, it was controlling itself and determining its own path wherever that was going to go. So I sort of likened it to a sort of very elaborate form of daydreaming, really. With a huge backing group and a big audience. So really, I tried to treat it on that level, really. And the idea for me was after having been so sort of fundamentally influenced by all these other people we'd met and talked to and shared time with and shared their houses with, that would hopefully help me to create a personal idea of a vision, or confront a personal vision for what Elephant and Castle could be in the future. And this really took the form of an imaginative journey that I went on. And it was quite a difficult journey, and I did sort of announce some sort of very rough findings on the stage. But roughly, I'll give you a quick précis of what happened. Nothing much happened for a very long time. I had this idea of this future vision that I wanted to see. I wanted to see the vision in front of me. And this is what I took. So I sort of, usually when I work like this, I go down into a sort of call it a lower world, and use that entry point as a point to depart from and go on this journey. And nothing much happened for a long time, and I wasn't seeing anything, and it was pretty dark. Usually animals come up to me, and sometimes they do stuff, sometimes they don't. Really nothing was happening. Sometimes whole habitats appear, and I explore those, but that wasn't really happening either. And it was getting a little bit critical for me, because I was slightly aware that, you know, this has taken 2 years to set up, and nothing was really happening. So there's a fair amount of pressure. And I sort of drift in and out, really, quite a lot, feeling shit, what's happening? Okay, I've got to get relaxed and just get on with it. And then I saw some seals, and started, and they were stuck up on these top of these kind of high mounds. And they weren't,
the animals.
These are animal seals, yeah. And they weren't doing anything. They were just sort of sat there, just kind of shitting, really.
Shitting on their shit.
Shitting on their shit. And I kind of got quite cross with them because nothing was coming back from them. Usually there's some sort of interaction, but nothing was happening. So I got quite cross. And then I went on, and this is amazing, actually. I got surrounded by a whole flock of geese. But they weren't recognisably geese. They were so tiny that I couldn't see them. So they're like a sort of sticky mist of geese. And both of those felt quite a negative experience, really. And then, what was the last one, Michael? Yes, right. And then I kind of just stopped because I still hadn't really entered into any lightness or seen this vision I wanted to see. And then I stopped, and I felt these things under my armpits. And it turned out that these swallows were building nests under my armpits. And they were kind of, in that swallow way, they were building up incrementally, slowly. And then that was quite a revelation, in that it felt like I was actually being built upon. And then I was actually the place. And I was being inhabited myself. Which felt like I was the kind of Elephant and Castle, really. Well, in that sort of, the extension of yourself, you project yourself onto a place and you subsume the identity of the place. And I sort of interpreted this as the idea that this singular vision really wasn't going to happen for me. And this monumental, futuristic vision wasn't going to happen. And what I thought was probably much more suitable was a very small, perhaps organic, but very small, incremental, evolutionary approach to the whole development. It was very much more about separate entities working away rather than giving this whole thing to one developer. And this is the idea that we took to the council.
Also allowing the council to trust the people that have big investments in the neighbourhood. The individuals that have been there for 30 plus years, and actually listening to their ideas as opposed to bringing in people from other places to manage this, which now in this sort of economic meltdown could be a viable thing for some time.
What did they make of when you told them about the swallows and everything, and the armpits and everything?
Well, I don't know if are they here? I don't know.
Southwark Council here?
We have our local councillors here on the front row, so I don't know.
No, I can't see anyone. they hopefully will come later, but no.
But they brilliantly came to the.
But they seem very accepting of the whole thing.
Yeah, they came to the gig and they really enjoyed it. And I think they were just in a very difficult position for them. I mean, we went to them afterwards and I announced what I'd seen, really, and told them pretty much the story that I told you. And we kind of suggested these, a few ideas, perhaps how they could think about going forward in the future, particularly because this singular vision really doesn't seem to be working, and all the developers are dropping out. I think it was just really hard for them to take on because they've got so much invested in the singular vision, and it's so much about saving face for them that I think it was just so hard for them to even entertain the idea of ditching it all, doing a whole procurement thing and starting all again. So they're probably the wrong people to talk to about it.
No, but to give them credit, they were. I mean, when I went along to that meeting, they seemed to be taking the whole thing incredibly seriously, almost like, I'd say almost too seriously. I mean, it's like, but again, full credit to them because it was almost like a kind of leap of faith, which everyone seemed to be prepared to make.
Well, I think they were taking it seriously because we were talking to everybody. In the area.
So you're getting real reactions and
real
finding out what's going on.
They were quite nervous by the amount of people we were actually spending time with in their own homes, like Ernie and Gloria. They didn't expect, I don't think, us having access to all these different worlds.
Yeah, so they really knew what was happening.
Yes, they had to take it seriously.
Yeah.
And they had difficult relationships with a lot of these people as well.
Of course.
So they were really worried about, I think, what we were going to say and how we were going to deal with it.
Yeah.
Did the council see it as a kind of consultation in any way? I mean, I'm just thinking about how they justified the expenditure on a kind of shamanic ritual and how, in reality, they had to tell their line managers what the kind of value of the exercise was. Just thinking of a kind of
how they justified it, really.
How did they?
I think they got a lot of slack for it. They did this thing, maybe you could articulate this better, but earlier on in the year, or at the end of 2008, where they suggested to the TRA residents at the Haygate Estate that they have a stress counselling workshop where they got, I guess, a shaman, or what was the terminology? A stress buster or something to help them negotiate the trauma of being evicted.
Right.
So, and it failed dismally. Obviously, everyone was like, we actually would like answers to where we're going to live, not somebody come along and try to... Yeah, we'll not get evicted, basically. This is... Yeah, it made everyone really angry.
What, so someone came in as this kind of employed stress buster?
Stress buster, yeah, to
But
do
it
breathing
wasn't
workshops.
Marcus?
No.
Okay.
So basically, Emery and I rock up and we're like, wow, that's just happened to you, and we're about to propose a shaman comes and works with you. How are we going to do that? And it basically, as the project happened, everyone dictated their own journey.
But how did you meet them? I mean, because I thought you were based in East London. How did you get involved with?
Well, as I said earlier, we just knocked on their door and said, hi, can we...
You just kind of gravitated to Elephant and Castle, and there happened to be some consultation kind of needed, and you happened to fit in.
Well, it was
There's all this stuff going on in Elephant
Yeah.
Castle. Anyway,
Yeah.
The whole redevelopment it's been going on for... I mean, I live down the road. It's been going on for years.
over a decade, isn't it? It's 10 years.
10 years it went down on the drawing board.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's. I mean, you can go on the internet and you can see these designs for the whole thing. And I mean, I think if you start looking at it, there'll be something like 2007 projection, 2009, 2011, whatever.
There's a fantastic wall near the Haygate Estate after the Coronet, where there's this big wall and it says completed in 2005. They didn't take that down, but they put another one up saying completed in 2007. They didn't take that down, and then they said completed, I think, in 2000. Yeah, but it's all side by side. So that in itself was like...
The next one, 2017.
Yeah, I thought it was 14, 17 now.
There's something that Ernie pointed out to me, which I thought was really important. I don't know if you remember, but I said to you, because I used to cycle past the Haygate late at night, and I think, that's scary up there. I'm going to get mugged. And you said, no, it's a really good place to live, and they're really good flats, and they're big, and well built, and a sort of good community relationship there. And I thought that's an important thing, not the kind of image of a place, but the reality of how people live and how, you know, if a flat works, rather than seeing it as this, oh, it's a terrible nightmare, it's a sign of London's social problems, you know, actually the reality seems that, you know, you're saying that you're very happy there.
Yeah, we was. 35 years.
Yeah.
We've never had one problem.
Yeah.
35 years.
Yeah, I think that was the apparent thing when we appeared at the TRA office. They were like, oh, it's all dissolving, there's no community anymore. And the next, 10 months, we've been immersed in one of the most...
Michael, can we get Ernie and Gloria to speak about how they felt about you guys coming in?
Yeah.
Because we've heard them, we've heard their voices, but rather than talk about the experience of living in the estate, the experience of these guys
Ernie, are you up for
coming in?
giving it a...
We was pleased, right? Because I actually went on television a couple of times because I was in a depressive state one time because what they was offering me, it wasn't a fair exchange for what I had. Eventually, I got what I wanted, but it took me 6, 7, 8 months. I was I was sort of in a very depressive state for a while. I didn't want to do nothing with my life, and you see what I had. I had a lovely place, didn't I?
And Ernie used to be the caretaker of the estate for many years as well, so he knew everyone and kind of held it all together, basically.
It was brilliant. I mean, we had the best party in London. You know, Jubilee Party, 77? We must have had the best party in London. Massive, wasn't it? It was 1,100 tenants, 1,100 dwellings, and all their families, and the estate was buzzing for the whole day. You know, and that's things like that, you know, and obviously now it's nothing, it could never be like that again, because everybody's drifted away now. I've lost a lot of friends actually, haven't you? You know what I mean?
So, Ernie, can I ask, how does a man in a horse's head on stage communicate some of the stories that you told them and the emotions that you're feeling about the development?
Well, he had to make his own interpretation, didn't he? You know, he knew our situations, he took us on board, and then he had to interpret it, which he did quite well, I believe.
I think it's a thing of listening as opposed to telling.
Yeah, he he just watched us and monitored us, didn't he? You know what I mean? That's all you had to do, monitor us. Yeah. And then from that, you could make your own interpretation of what you did. And I haven't seen the whole of it yet, have I? We haven't seen it fully, but I was happy with what you'd done anyway.
You were quite clear about that with me.
Yeah,
I remember saying, what do I need to say?
We was open.
What do I need to do? And you said, well, it's got to come from you. It's no good me telling you.
No, you had to find out for yourself. You know, and you did get a feel of the estate, didn't you, for the time you spent there. I mean, you slept on the landing some nights. You stayed in the blocks 10 floors up, in freezing cold, trying to get a feel of the place, you know. And it was quite quiet, wasn't it? There was nothing going on at the time, was there?
I think it's mainly because no one was living there.
Oh, well, yeah. A lot of people had decanted by then.
Yeah. No, we did get woken up a few times.
Yeah, but I say, you made your interpretation, and it's no way is it detrimental to anybody on the estate.
Well, the other thing I think about what you've done, Marcus, is it's not judgmental in any way. It's almost like, I don't know, I may interpret it completely wrong, but it seems open-ended and therefore just kind of intriguing. What is going on here? You know, it didn't feel like a sort of imposing, a big vision in a way. It felt like much more just sort of doing something and seeing how people react.
That was kind of interesting because the night we both slept out on this balcony, and we were in the middle of this very long sort of 60-hour shoot where I guess we were all in a trance because we're so tired and cold. And it was 4 in the morning or something, and these teenagers started running up the stairs, and Marcus and I were just like, oh, shit, teenagers. And the bird we carried around as kind of a guide was above us and just near the stairs, and they got to the bird and screamed, and we're like, shit, bird! And then we were like, and then they're like, oh, it's you. We've seen you for the last couple of days. What are you doing? Who are you? And they climbed into our sleeping zone and just wouldn't shut up. In the end, you were like, can you go? I want to get some sleep. So, you know, that was potentially a really dodgy situation that was navigated, you know, it's sort of like the whole project in a way.
I think it was quite important to say that we didn't really have an agenda from the beginning. And that's maybe why we've kind of gone on this sort of very circuitous route around the whole thing and not really been that sure of what the end result will be. But I think the good thing about that is that we've kind of been able to talk to an enormous variety of people, and those people have actually been able to talk to each other through the project. So I think you're asking how sort of someone with a horse on the head could be of benefit. I think the process fundamentally is of benefit on some level.
I'm quite interested that your initial vision was swallows and geese, because I was listening to you guys talking earlier about only having moved, and that notion, and you're talking about the politics of redevelopment, you know, and your vision was of two migrating species, you know, and will these people ever go back? Or are they under the seals being shat on? I don't know.
Yeah, but there's also the seal, of the high seal, which obviously, you know, the current icon of the redevelopment is the new building. You know, and so, I mean, I don't know if we can make such a literal translation, but it seems a very clear image in terms of, you know, in terms of the building that is now dominating the Elefest.
Yeah.
You know, and through the period when you would have been there, you know, I see it from my balcony growing every day, you know, so it's such a strong thing to build the creation of that new building, you know.
Yeah, and for me it was about not prescribing what that ritual should be, that performance, and that was pretty much improvised with Chrome Hoof. And we knew they were amazing improvisers. That's kind of one of the reasons why we worked with them. But I didn't really want anything to be prescribed. We had a beginning point and we had an end point, so we didn't go on all night. But in between that, anything could really happen. But I think what I had to do was just really trust that whatever I saw or came up with, I had to be serious about that and take that seriously. And that's the farcical thing, taking your imagination that seriously. And that's what I've tried to do with everyone we've met, really, to talk about their own personal vision or collective vision, but through their imagination and making that significant. And that's the thing that everyone seems to have a problem with.
Well, also, it's a good thing because it's hard. It makes it very hard to just dismiss because it's not a genre or anything, you know. And Chrome Hoof, I think, are the perfect band for that because they're not any genre, you know. So you might say, oh, they're heavy metal. I don't like heavy metal. They're reggae. And I don't like reggae. Whatever. Because they're not. And anyway, music shouldn't really be thought of in that way. Then it's, you know, there's so many different elements that you can't categorise them. And I felt that the whole thing, that was the best thing about it was that it was impossible to categorise. And so it was almost just doing it was enough.
And because it can't be categorised, it can't be dismissed, maybe.
That's what I mean.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because if you know, that's what I'm saying. You know, you say, well, as soon as you put something in the box, it's easy for people because you can dismiss it.
Yeah, and I think it still is open in that way. And I think I'm thinking maybe that's slightly negative now because we don't know how to close it. And as soon as we close it, we define it.
Yeah, it's got an end.
Yeah, so it's kind of maybe not have an end. I don't know how it's going to pan out.
We're moving back into your house actually next week.
I don't know. I live on the nearby Aylesbury. I don't know how aware the Haygate tenants are of the situation on the Aylesbury, but it's another huge estate in Southwark, and we're about to undergo the same process. You know, so what's happening on the Haygate is the developer there was meant to sort of say what their plans were by July, and then it slipped, and then they had to say they're meant to say what their plans are by the end of December, and it, you know, sort of so just, you know, what next is, you know, sort of I think, you know, the story. Are you aware of the Aylesbury?
Yeah. And I guess the Haygate is being this crash test dummy for the Aylesbury, which is quite interesting. I think a lot of people from the council anyway, I think got to learn quick from the mistakes they made on the Haygate, because the Aylesbury's bigger, isn't it?
Yeah, and you know, so I've got all sorts of different sort of, you know, I feel very, very emotional that, you know, my you know, sort of estate is about to be pulled down, but also I get emotional about the subtlety of the processes of you know, the power, you know, because we actually, unlike the Haygate, we had a ballot in 2001 with a very, very clear result that the tenants did not want demolition, and there's a political component to this as well. That, you know, these are both big council estates, and in sort of this economic climate, where to me it's partially caused by the property boom, by the the ideology that everybody should be homeowners, and that's what we should aspire to, and that property prices need to keep rising. And my vision is that everybody should have a home for next to nothing, and that's what, to me, council housing means, is actually, you have a home, somebody builds it, and then you get on and you live there, and it's actually, why should it be part of the sort of like the economic sort of state of affairs? So this kind of like this, all of this sort of shade, sort of I would guess that sort of the people who commissioned this piece were shamans. That sort of sounds kind of not particularly political. It doesn't sound dangerous, and sort of I'm intrigued by the process of the ticking the boxes, and I bet there was something about that you had to do about outreach and how many people that how many people's lives you're going to impact, and there's this, I don't know, so that but I don't know, there's all this stuff that comes through our doors, and the Haygate people as well, I presume, where these sort of really, really expensive brochures, sort of with somebody has spent a lot of time and effort producing these graphic designs. So, sorry.
They sent the stress busters on the outbreak.
Yeah.
You'll be all right.
And it's a picture of a vision, of somebody's vision, and it's not being. It's a fantasy. Because it's not based on real communication with the real people whose real lives affect.
It's an old model, basically, which is becoming more dated by the day.
Yeah. But the trouble, I mean, lots of the the council officials that I talk to, they're sucked into, sort of, I don't know, they're sucked into a vision which doesn't really correspond with what the reality is. And I just worry a bit that this is sort of like, I don't know, just something to potentially an event that kind of glosses, it sugarcoats the bitter pill. It makes it all look nice that we're doing, we're providing community arts activities for the community.
Do you feel that you've helped legitimise the council's decision by, being a part of the box tick exercise? They've done the questionnaires, they've had the shaman in, therefore they can evict the residents and knock down the estate.
Well, I think it's interesting to think about where this project came from, and it didn't come from the council. It didn't come from the residents. And it really came from me and Michael, and it was our idea to do it. And we knew in order to do it, we needed to get all these different partners together. And the council was one of those partners, and the residents were one of the partners.
To tell you the truth, the Southwark Council, anyway, was so busy firefighting, they didn't really get involved in any of box-ticking exercises with us. I think they were just... And it's a pity they're not here tonight, because in our sort of summary to them, they just said we were gobsmacked that you actually met so many people as you did and gained so much access. And as I said before, I think they were taken along for the ride because they had to in the end. It wasn't them showing us a little journey. How they ticked these boxes, I'm not quite sure. I think a lot of their colleagues are very critical and also still very nervous. For the first couple of meetings, I had the PR person of Southwark follow me around like a rash. He asked to meet me the day before we went on the Vision Quest and gave me all this speak that he was hoping would rub off. And he came to the first council meeting to kind of make sure everyone behaved from their team, and they were nervous, and I think they still are in a way. But as we touched on before, we're not there to judge. It's just we're trying to create this very open assessment of what's going on.
It was quite interesting what the gentleman said, and also what you're saying is, in a way, the fact that they're getting involved at all is a bit indicative of the fact that something is, essentially, if it was all happening, and if the people who live there, if their needs were being catered to and answered, they wouldn't probably have any involvement with this whatsoever. I've got a feeling, and I think it's quite interesting because I remember. But the other thing is that it brings up all these questions, because then I came along and started asking, well, how much of this redevelopment, just sort of knew something about, but not that much. How much is going to be public sector and how much is going to be private? And it certainly wasn't as much as public sector as there is now. So people had to be moved out. Money was basically being made, obviously.
There is going to be a net loss of social housing.
There has to be, otherwise there wouldn't be the money for it.
Of about a thousand properties between the Haygate and the Aylesbury. There's going to be a net loss of social housing.
Yeah, but you just have to do the maths, don't you? You have to kind of work out where all the money comes from, and it's got to be private sector, otherwise it's not going to happen.
Yeah, another odd thing is I went to see Chrome Hoof perform at the Barbican recently with Magma, a famous prog band, and a lot of the Southwark councillors that were on the project with us were there, and I found out they were closet prog fans. They were like, yeah, we like prog. So that was also quite interesting as well. It touched them on a, purely...
Chrome Hoof are really brilliant. I mean, they're a wild band. They're not like, it's not like booking James Blunt. I mean, there's like, you're dealing with something really brilliant,
which
and
was
really
a complete risk as well.
Yeah,
in a way.
I think for the council though, it was more risky not being involved. I think they saw what we were doing, and
it was going to happen anyway.
I think that they knew we were kind of vocalising people's problems and anger, and that's what we were interested in as well. So
did you need them to do it? You would have just carried on without. How would it be different without them?
Well, they actually just helped us pay for the venue. We would have actually raised the money ourselves.
In the light of this sort of conversation, do you think it might have been better to do it without them?
No, because I think it was great to go and to propose this with them and talk them through how this could be a benefit to them.
And I think also when I first came into the TRA office, I said, well, we're going to do this anyway. It'd be great if you're involved. And secondly, I'm not here to sympathise with you. And the same to the council. We're doing this anyway. It'd be great if you're involved, but I'm not here to kind of make you out to be good guys. And that's been very transparent the whole way through.
And the hardest thing was not just to tell Ernie and Gloria's story about being decanted out of the state, because there's this, we really took on that. We felt so passionate about their story. And I felt a huge amount of responsibility to them. But also I knew we were talking about the elephant in the castle, not just a few individuals. So it was very hard not to get trapped into a singular vision and be kind of truthful to my own imagination and my own kind of...
Which goes, I guess, back to Chrome Hoof as well. They are so many components making up one thing. It's very complex and complicated. So in a way, they were a perfect vehicle to take that complicated vision to a degree.
Could I ask a question? I mean, does anybody know what the reason is for the getting rid of the Haygate and the redevelopment of the Aylesbury, and also the tower block that's just gone up, that massive great tower block that must have cost an absolute fortune? What's it for? So it's a private development. So, I mean, it seems to me that, what you're saying...
I heard a rumour that it was going to be a hotel. No, it's going to be private flats.
Maybe 10% council. Council get a job.
So it seems to me that there's massive issues of power here.
They just want to make the Elephant Castle look smart. You can understand it looks an eyesore.
Yeah.
They want to pull it down and start again. That's what they come.
So I'll just paraphrase what you're saying. Yeah, only saying that the reason why they're going to redevelop the whole area is because it's an eyesore and it's central London and they can make money from it.
The shopping centre is a disgusting place, isn't it? Sorry, the shopping centre is actually disgusting. We walk through it, it's not very nice in there, is it?
I actually quite like it. I've actually come to really love.
I quite like that pub
Elephant Castle.
at the bottom where we had a game of. Did we have a game of snooker? No, but that. Yeah, I thought it was
Yeah,
alright.
yeah,
I must be different borough.
Yeah, and there's heaps of space. Like it's I like the brutalist architecture.
It has deteriorated, obviously.
It could look better, couldn't it?
Yeah. Pink is a bad
I'm
colour.
saying it's scruffy, it looks a bit scruffy.
Yeah.
The underground, all the walkways are really bloody confusing. You never know which way. That's.
I don't go through them.
But which
that's
is also
really, that doesn't work that long.
That's also very similar to the Haygate Estate, and I think that's why the elephant's intimidating, because once you go in, you don't know where you are and where to go. And I think
pedestrianise the elephant if they can, but it probably never happen. So you actually walk with a cross, walkways and things like that, not walkways, pedestrian areas. But they can't do that because you've got 5 lines of traffic coming through them.
You can see why. They've got the House of Parliament half a mile away. You can see why they want to redevelop this whole area.
They want to smile it out, it's as simple as that.
Yeah.
Sorry, when you just said, you go in, you can't work out quite where you are on the walkway, so it's obviously very like the Barbican in the centre of the City of London, which obviously has a slightly different group of people.
Well, the Brunswick Centre as well is very similar.
Who are living there. So I was just making that comparison in terms of, pieces of architecture that we know where the dream for the architecture came from, and it came, the modernist dream in the 50s, 60s, and then they were built either in the 60s or 70s. But those places are different.
Well, that's an interesting point, and it was in a lot of conversations throughout the making of this, using the Brunswick Centre, the Haygate Estate, and the Barbican as 3 buildings that are very similar. For some reason, the Haygate, though, has expired. But it's the same materials. The difference is it's the class. Brunswick Centre has been done up recently. It's very middle class.
Brunswick was council flats.
Yeah, and it was let to ruin in a way.
And there are plenty of models around Europe where refurbishment has really worked, and actually has been a lot cheaper than demolition and rebuilding. And I kind of took the sort of swallow analogy, the idea of rebuilding your nest every year. It's almost like the idea of refurbishing your old nest, as swallows do, and took them and kind of did some rough costings of refurbishment as well. But apparently they'd looked at that as well and gone against it. But I think politically it just doesn't work for them, refurbishment, because it's born as an eyesore.
What has been the net result of that exercise? There will be actual changes to the politics of development in the area?
It's difficult for us to ascertain what the net results are. I think we have some inklings in terms of how the project has impacted on certain individuals. Politically, I'm not sure. I think we might have just been another prod in them saying, this isn't working, you've got to change it, you've got to dramatically rethink it. But I think what we've done is still carrying on. I think we're yet to see the results of what we're doing. But my hope always is that, an art project can have a political effect somehow.
A social impact too.
Yeah, social impact as well.
Are you aware of other similar art or creative projects which have a weight in terms of urbanism and regenerational changes of life to people?
Yeah, I was actually talking last night to you about that. Who's the name of the artist in New York who started photographing a railway track over many years in summer, spring, autumn? And over the years, he's generated so much interest in that track and the nature that's developed around there, the ecosystem of plants and insects, that now it's a national park in the heart of New York City, something that was considered redundant and an eyesore. And that came out of a series of photographs over a decade. That was quite interesting.
I think it's been difficult for us because we haven't actually set out with something to resolve. We haven't set out with a question to resolve, which I normally work with, actually. We haven't set out with some goals we want to achieve. So in that sense, it's kind of a rambling project. But that's suited it as well. So it is about an ongoing influence, I think.
I think we had to surrender to that in a way. And basically allow, very much like what happened with Marcus and Chrome Hoof, the next stage of editing, for instance, to take that similar approach as well, which is quite vague in some way, which is a bit intimidating, but...
Yeah, it's scary, the uncertainty. And I think that's what we're all dealing with, is the uncertainty. No one really knows what's going to happen in the future. And the council are constantly giving us certainty by giving us this singular vision, this beautiful, futuristic place. Actually, I think people are much more pragmatic about the uncertainty of life. And I think that's kind of what I'm dealing with these processes, and how sitting in that uncertainty is a more creative place and much more receptive to the realities of your situation.
What you're saying, there's no utopia, is there?
No, there's no utopia. And that's what they're trying to give you.
Well, it's also a bit Brave New World, isn't it? Selling this idea of kind of calm and perfection, which, of course, as we all know, doesn't exist.
I think the idea of delving into the sort of cauldron of the unknown, the way you're describing it, sounds really fascinating. But I mean, traditionally, I think shamans, they do that, and there is some material effect. And I just worry a little bit about, which I think is a very art world concern, about not sort of actually pinning yourself down and actually coming to some kind of conclusion and just saying, oh no, this is just wrong. And the idea of a shaman is especially like this whole tradition of shaman kind of being used in sort of New Age spirituality, where you get, like people working in the stock exchange to go on the weekend and like discover they're in a man and beat drums and stuff like that, and then go back and do the same things, And I think that there is this tendency in the West to kind of strip mine spiritualities from different cultures, like yoga and the body beautiful and all this kind of stuff. And it's just completely missing the point. Even a medieval hermit or anchorite was really, really engaged in the structure of society, and we've kind of lost that. And it seems to me that's the similar thing. When you talk about the responsibility of art, the function of art.
Yeah, that's something I'm very sensitive about, I think, with all my work. And this project has been the most difficult in that sense, because there hasn't been a determined end goal. Usually I just start off with a question that I try and answer, and I give maybe a bit of a vague answer, but I give an answer. And I feel like my responsibility is to, rather than artists providing questions, I feel like I've put myself in a position where I'm going to actually provide an answer. But with this project, I think we're not entirely sure what the question is yet.
Didn't you say you wanted to get all these different voices talking to each other? And that was one of the ways to do it.
Lots of that. But I think you're saying, you're not putting yourself on the line. Are you saying that?
I'm just getting the feeling. I mean, I wondered what that tower block that you were talking about, because that went up so quick. I just thought, my God, and it's just so blatant that there's just in terms of energy, that massive amount of energy to build that, and it could have been used to kind of make the place where you were living better, or it's just, to me, I don't have any doubts about it. I just think it's wrong. I can't. There's nothing in myself that could kind of see that there's any justice in that.
Well, I think we have a very strong feeling that parts of it are very wrong, but we also see that parts of the area are really run down and they need some help.
Sure, yeah, but I mean, it's the fact that, if you've got a boil on your skin, which is what that tower block, it's like all this kind of poison going into this, building this private thing for these people, and that energy could be better used.
It's a very strange middle finger to Elephant and Castle, isn't it?
It's like it. Yeah.
I don't see how it fits in with the whole thing though, because they've stuck this thing up. I mean, with all the things, have you seen all the website stuff where they got all the pictures? It's like it's all one big. The whole thing was going to come down. It's all going to be built in one big go, and it's all going to be amazing. I don't really see. It's basically somebody's got the money and stuck that thing up, haven't they? I mean, that's how it works. Basically, how property works. Let's face it.
There's also a symbol of hope for the investors, maybe.
Yeah, maybe.
People that they want in there. But I've got to wrap this up. But is there any other quick questions before we, Rob?
Sorry, it's not so much a question. It's more, I suppose, a little bit about Elefest. Kind of just sitting here listening to this conversation, it kind of struck me that there's quite a few parallels.
Can I interrupt here? Rob Ray basically invented Elefest. It's his project that he kind of does off his own back. And he's been quite helpful to us in the whole process. So.
Okay, you're more than welcome. What I was trying to get at was some of the conversation that's going on here about the lack of redevelopment, the lack of regeneration, the fact that there's limbo. It's kind of like, in a way, we started the Elefest in 2003 as a way of trying to get something creative and cultural happening in the area. And the reason why we done that was because the original regeneration plan back in 2000 had fallen apart. So there's a certain thing of, it's been going on for 10 years, more or less. And we were building the festival, trying to build some creativity, try and create, celebrate the area. And it's kind of like we got some funding from the council, we get some funding from the developers, but the catch to it all was you're trying to celebrate an area while at the same time the people giving you the money are trying to change it. And it's quite a difficult dilemma to be in, because you're almost like, if the local people don't necessarily like the plans that are coming, they don't necessarily, it's guilt by association. And that's always been the problem with the festival, and it's just bizarre that after 7 or 8 years of running the festival, we're still in this sort of catch-22 where the people who are living on the Haygate and the Aylesbury, they still don't know what's going on. They still don't know if they're going to be there 10 years, 15 years. The economic bubble has burst. There doesn't seem to be any financial support for the redevelopment, so it's kind of like it's limbo. You understand what I'm saying? I know that's quite a long rambling way of putting it, but some of the themes that are being talked about here, we've been going around in a circle for nearly 10 years, and I don't think it's good for the local people, to be honest, and that's about it.
I think that's the circular nature of the project as well.
Yeah, for sure. So hopefully something will happen at some point.
David?
Yeah, actually, Mark, if you want to shoot more film, any idea what you want to do?
I think we've got to look at what we've done, spend a bit more time with that. Yeah, I've got a few ideas. Yeah, but how we show that at the end, I'm not sure yet. Very.
Just.
Oh, sorry.
Very. I know I've got a few ideas, but I like when you said about the boys coming to the floor where you were sleeping and the energy, and that they wanted to spend sort of time and that they were talking a lot and Rika is a documentary maker who's I don't know, just as you know, sort of somebody on the receiving end of a process. I feel a sense of relief that there is another viewer who comes in as an observer to, I don't know, sort of try to establish what is the truth, but there's so the function of the observer is to sort of like assimilate information, but also sort of actually I work with children, people respond to having attention paid to them, or situations respond to attention being paid. And if there is a sort of like an independent person who's paying attention to a problem from a different perspective without a particular vested interest, I think that is valuable.
Just you're going to release some of them as a kind of what's going to happen there?
We haven't really left.
We haven't really. Yeah.
You made some friends anyway.
Yeah, well, we did. We made some, it's, yeah, like any project, it just becomes a part of you, really, and it's, we're still very much here.
Has funding finished?
There wasn't much funding to begin with.
Really.
Amazingly, the gig happened to fill up, and it covered a lot of costs, and a lot of it's just done through goodwill. Amazingly, a huge team of amazing people that just give us time.
Yeah. I mean, cameras and sound and Michael and me. I mean, a lot of us put our own money into it, so it's a sort of labour of love for us, really.
Like the sort of public funding is so nominal. Like it's it's great, it helped, but it's very much an ongoing process. It's not just okay, 3 months we do this. But saying that, I'm going to wrap up, and I just want to thank, obviously, Rob Ray from Elefest and Siobhan Davies, Alison Proctor, Sam Collins, and all the Siobhan Davies crew, and of course Piera, who produces with me as Nomad, and of course you guys, and you guys letting us kind of into your world. But yeah, any other questions afterwards, just grab us, and any feedback as well on what you see, because it's a chaotic thing.
Yeah, or any ideas? What do you think?
Yeah. What to do with it. But yeah, thanks a lot.
Thank you.